Well, now joining us, Ted Warman with the Huntsville OPP, a familiar face here on Cogeco News, but talking to us from the office today. Ted, first of all, thanks for taking the time.
Anytime. Happy to be here.
Ted, talking to you about a concerning trend that we've seen both in Bracebridge and now apparently in Huntsville, rise in impaired drivers. We're seeing more of these reports coming out from both detachments. And while we've talked to the Bracebridge OPP about this, thought it would be a good opportunity to talk to Huntsville about what you're seeing specifically. So first of all, run me through, what are these stats looking like in years comparison?
Well, to the date this year, we've had 17 impaired. So from January 1st till today, March 13th, 17th, excuse me, we've had 17 impaired charges laid in Huntsville, which is um, an escalated number compared to last year. At this time, we had seven.
Wow.
So, and that's pretty much following a provincial trend, unfortunately. Everything seems to be um, going up. Looking at a 5-year trend in the province, between 2020 and 2024, the numbers went from about 8,800 impaired charges to about 11,500. So it's increasing steadily over the last 5 years.
Now, the provincial numbers do not seem to reflect a higher trend that's happening here. I mean, you're talking about 3,000 more maybe, but per capita here, it sounds like it's almost doubled for us in Huntsville. The question I have to that rate, Ted, is do you equate this to more people driving impaired, which I hope isn't the case, or is it more officers out on the road, more enforcement happening when it comes to this? The chicken and egg scenario that we question.
I think, to be honest, they go hand in hand. I think there's a lot more impaired driving than we realize. I think people are basically just not not wanting to make plans, not coming up with alternative solutions when they're consuming substances. I know the OPP has been steadily increasing the training for officers from the day they get hired to officers who've been on the road for years. In 2018, the laws changed across the country, allowing what's called mass or mandatory alcohol screening. So that gives the police the authority to test anybody who's driving. And it's as simple as you get stopped for whatever reason, the officer can walk up with a roadside screening device and ask for a breath sample. Prior to that, it was you had to have a suspicion that alcohol was being consumed or in the person's body before you could make that demand. So the law changing allowed us to just randomly do it. Um, and that has revealed a lot more people who are consuming alcohol, whether they're impaired or they end up with a 3-day driving license suspension, etc. And that has gone up as well, the 3-day driving license suspension. So I think it goes hand in hand. It's people not taking care of themselves or of their driving behavior, but us as well having more tools and more training to detect it and to deal with it.
Just for full context, for our audience sake and for my sake too, when we talk about these impaired numbers, these stats that you've brought us today, Ted, are these specific to alcohol impaired, or are these a mix of alcohol and drug impaired?
It's a mix.
Okay.
I think alcohol is more prevalent. I don't have the breakdown between the two, but alcohol still is consistently the most impacted type of impairment.
So, what's the messaging here? I mean, we've heard this over and over again, and we can kind of talk this to death almost, of how frustrating it is for officers to continually face this scenario over and over and over again, and putting these ride programs out in different areas. I just quickly, anecdotally, I want to mention, cleverly, I saw an officer just a month ago right downtown Huntsville at the intersection of Brunel and Main, in the way of everyone, but perfectly placed that no one would be able to get around that. These are more clever things that are happening, but we're still seeing a rise. So what do we do here, Ted?
I think well, education is going to be very important. The consequences are enormous for impaired operation of a motor vehicle. Not The criminal element is one thing, but the implications on your driving in the future, whether you can afford insurance, being a high risk driver, whether you've hurt somebody, either in your own car or outside your car, that'll have long lasting effects on you on a personal level, whether you're incarcerated or, having to deal with your behavior. Um, I've kind of lost my train of thought on your question, James.
That's okay. I mean, honestly, Ted, I'm getting and it's not just from you. I'm getting the level of frustration that I think is coming with this. Is that I feel like some officers just don't know what's going to get through anymore, and all you can do is continue to just enforce as much as you can, and try to make these stricter laws. Try to make sure that more instruments are in place to make sure that we're catching these people. All right.
Well, and we have tools. We have all the majority of officers that are being hired, and the training in what we call standard field sobriety testing. That's usually used for drug testing of an individual who's driving. Whereas if we believe it was just alcohol, we would use an improved screening device. So we have a lot more opportunities to address impaired driving, whether it's drugs or alcohol. And if people aren't going to take care to not be doing that, we're just basically going to enforce everything that we possibly can. That's the only way we can keep our roads safe.
Just quickly before we move and let you get back to work here, Ted, I just want to talk about the frustration you're probably feeling as a family man and as an officer as well. I know if I had a family that was out on the road, I would be concerned, especially about this trend that's happening, that their safety is at jeopardy as well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we all see the news stories where people have lost their lives um, in collisions where, an impaired driver has hit them. I personally, in my career, have had the task of notifying family members that something exactly like that has occurred to their family member. It's awful for the family getting that kind of news. So it's about us being responsible. If people act a little more responsibly when they're consuming either alcohol or drugs or even their own medications, what have you, be very aware of what you should and shouldn't be doing and plan ahead.
Ted, I appreciate the bare bones look at this, the frank look at what's happening. Obviously, I think there is concern in the community about this growing, but of course there are elements in here that, as we mentioned, new enforcement, new tools. So there is a bit of a balance of what's happening. But overall, as you said, the messaging is the same. We need to get people off the road impaired. We need to start getting the education out of making a second plan and not getting behind the wheel where you're impaired with alcohol or drugs.
Absolutely.